Hey everyone, this video is about the early signs in my life that I was trans and how that plays into the importance of visibility and education for trans people. First, a disclaimer, not everyone who is trans had signs during childhood, and that is completely fine. These people are just as valid as any other trans person. The earliest signs of me being trans were from before I turned 5, before I started kindergarten. I had a strong preference for toys typically associated with girls, such as dolls and strollers. And I got along better with girls at my age. Like, in particular, I remember a beautiful princess-themed birthday party that a neighbor of mine invited me to, and even though I was very young at the time, I still remember that party fondly and pretty vividly compared to the other memories I have at that age. But once I started kindergarten, it became pretty obvious that I was, supposed to be a boy. That, no, that type of stuff I did when I was younger, it's not really appropriate. I'm supposed to be, hanging out with the boys and doing, more boy stuff. And ultimately, I ended up losing that connection with my feminine side at a young age. The thing about kids is that they are very impressionable, and if you tell them, especially at a young age, that the world works a certain way, they're probably going to take your word for it. And in my case, telling me that I'm supposed to be a boy and this is the way that boys act, having this identity handed to me, suppressed any sort of self-identity I had at the time. I didn't have any signs of me being trans again until I entered puberty. Even though I didn't realize it at the time, I was experiencing gender dysphoria. Being shirtless at any point made me feel extremely self-conscious around my chest area. This kind of body dysphoria is distinctly different from other types of body image issues. I went through a phase where I tried to become more athletic and fit, and it didn't help me with my body image. If anything, it made me feel worse. And I think many trans people have also gone through a similar phase. I attended a religious boarding school where I had to go to church multiple times a week, but even there they had education about gay people and bi people, but certainly nothing about trans people. The difference between trans people and other minority groups is that from birth we are assigned a wrong identity. We are forced into a role that contradicts whatever identity we actually have. This isn't like handedness, where most people are right-handed, some people are left-handed, and a few people like my partner are ambidextrous. And although we live in a heteronormative society, people know now that there are gay people, there are bi people, not everyone is heterosexual, regardless of whether people like it or not. But with trans people, it's not just not being told that trans people exist. We are forced upon us an identity, a box to live in. Everyone at birth is just told that they are a boy or a girl, and that's just the way that things are. Without knowledge that you can be assigned the wrong gender, you're going to take up whatever identity you are given and assume that is correct. Your gender marker can be a literal death sentence. Hell, even people who transition still get pushed to suicide. There is a push right now to remove sex and gender from birth certificates, and frankly, I agree with that. The gender marker on your government ID determines how people treat you. You need correct ID to earn a basic semblance of human decency. When I was updating my ID, some people inevitably found out that I was trans and treated me worse because of it. Even people who you would hope would treat you better, such as medical professionals. It honestly doesn't make any sense for something that important to be determined by a letter on a document that is handed to us at birth. And when you think about it like that, it's just a coincidence that it represents cisgender people fine. It's not actually based on who you are as a person, it's just based on your birth certificate. Being trans is not new. I may not be an expert on trans history, but I know that trans healthcare was a political issue here in Canada during the 1900s. But no one's going to teach you that. Our schools here in Canada will tell you that the Canada Arm is the greatest technological marvel we have achieved as a nation. And they will warn you that credit cards are evil and you should be using Interact Debit instead. But even with year after year after year of redundant sex ed, no one is going to tell you that trans people exist and that transition is a thing. My white American cishet redneck boyfriend learned about trans people when he was 12 years old. You know how he did it? He watched an episode of Law and Order. I didn't have that luxury. I first learned about trans people when I was 19, Googling what the T stood for in LGBT, discovering that it's not a weird cross-dressing thing. You know how long it took me to realize that I was trans after discovering that transgender is a thing? Less than a day. Once I started reading the stories of other trans people, it became super obvious that I was trans. But not a single mental health professional I saw before this point could recognize my gender dysphoria. This is another reason why transgender education is so important. Because no matter how many hoops you have to jump through, no matter how many months of mandatory therapy sessions you have to pay for, and no matter how many different people your insurance company makes you see to diagnose you as the same thing, only you can tell whether or not you're trans. No one else can do it, no matter what they say. Maybe education is better now, but for people like me who transitioned without much support or resources, the damage is already done. The emotional and financial costs of transitioning are severe, but they can be lessened by starting at a young age. Hair removal, hair transplants, Adam's apple reduction, and voice feminization surgery for trans women, as well as top surgery for trans men. All of these expensive and time-consuming medical treatments can be avoided or at least lessened with puberty blockers. And this is all in addition to medical treatments that aren't puberty-related, such as hormone replacement therapy, bottom surgery, doctor visits, blood tests, and even just getting a silly diagnosis. This all takes time and money, and that is why I say that I am transitioning, not that I have transitioned, even though it's been 7 years, because for me it's still an ongoing process. And if you start too late, then there are things like your skeleton which can't really be changed. The same goes with personal items and personal experiences. Replacing wardrobes is expensive, and none of my graduation gifts are gender appropriate. But most importantly, I didn't get to live the childhood that I wanted. I didn't get to have nice girly princess birthday parties like I remember. And I didn't get to wear a beautiful dress to prom. I've never actually even owned a nice dress yet. When you don't know who you are, there is a ripple effect across your life. Gender dysphoria and depression can build up. When you don't do what you want and you just do what you're told, you don't develop the skills that you need to survive in life. In my case, this culminated in me dropping out of university and needing to give up my dreams for education and career. But that's a story for another day. My main takeaway from this video is that kids can have a sense of identity at a young age, but they are also impressionable, so if you stamp out that sense of self, then they may never figure out who they are until years down the road, if ever. It can take years of time, effort, and money to repair the damage. That is why education and visibility of trans people is so important, because no matter what society tells you, only you can know who you are. That is also why I started this channel, to talk about my personal experiences. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Hope to see you around. Bye!